The Illusion of Self, a journey into non-duality. Welcome to our podcast, Beyond the Self. Today we're exploring the fascinating world of non-duality and the illusion of self. The self we think we are is not a fixed entity, but a narrative constructed by our minds. It's a story we tell ourselves about who we are based on our memories, beliefs, and experiences. To confirm this idea, we'll explore ideas from Advaita Vedanta, modern psychology, and even quantum physics to challenge our conventional understanding of reality and identity. The dream of separation. Imagine you're dreaming. In this dream, you're a character with a complex backstory, goals, and challenges. You believe you're separate from the dream world around you, making choices and striving towards your objectives. But when you wake up, you realize that you, the dreamer, were never separate from the dream at all. Everything, the character you thought you were, the other people, the entire world, was all occurring within your mind, with your consciousness as a witness. From a psychological perspective, this idea parallels the understanding of the narrative self, the concept that our sense of identity is largely constructed by the mind through the stories we tell about ourselves. Cognitive neuroscience suggests that the brain synthesizes sensory inputs and memories to create a coherent sense of self. However, this self is not fixed or separate. It's an ongoing dynamic process, much like the dream metaphor. In quantum physics, the observer effect, where the act of observation alters the state of a quantum system, illustrates how consciousness plays a role in the formation of what we perceive as reality. This blurs the line between the observer and the observed, supporting the idea that the perceived separation between self and world is illusory. The mind's prison. Now let's consider another metaphor, Plato's cave. Imagine prisoners chained in a cave, only able to see shadows on the wall cast by objects passing in front of a fire behind them. These shadows are their only reality. In our case, the shadows are our thoughts, sensations, and perceptions, and we mistake them for ultimate reality. Our minds operate on cause and effect, creating a narrative of, if I do this, I'll get that. We're like Sisyphus, eternally pushing a boulder up a hill, always striving for some future state of happiness or enlightenment. But this very striving keeps us trapped in the illusion of separation. Plato's cave metaphor can be likened to the way the human brain processes information. Modern neuroscience reveals that our perception of reality is limited and often filtered by our mental models, which are shaped by past experiences, cultural conditioning, and biological predispositions. Cognitive biases further distort our view, creating a prison of the mind where we mistake our thoughts and perceptions for reality. The Sisyphus analogy touches on the concept of hedonic adaptation in psychology. Hedonic adaptation is the pursuit of pleasure or happiness through external achievements, which often leads to temporary satisfaction, followed by a return to a baseline state of contentment or discontentment. This cycle perpetuates the illusion that happiness lies in future attainments rather than in the present moment. The nature of reality. So what is reality if not what we perceive? Modern physics tells us that at the quantum level, reality is more like a probability wave than solid matter. What we perceive as solid objects are actually mostly empty space, with particles popping in and out of existence. Similarly, our experience of life is a constant flow of sensations, thoughts, and perceptions arising and disappearing in our awareness. It's not a solid, unchanging thing, but a process, an activity of life itself. Quantum mechanics introduces us to the concept of wave-particle duality, where particles such as electrons exhibit both wave-like and particle-like properties. This suggests that what we consider solid reality is fundamentally fluid and probabilistic. The concept of quantum entanglement also demonstrates the interconnectedness of seemingly separate entities, reinforcing non-duality's view of oneness. From a psychological standpoint, mindfulness practices reveal that our subjective experience is indeed a continuous flow, where thoughts and emotions arise and dissolve without any permanent self at the center. This aligns with the Buddhist concept of anatta, no self, which posits that the self is an ever-changing collection of experiences rather than a fixed identity. The illusion of self. Mainstream psychology now agrees with ancient wisdom traditions. The self we think we are is not a fixed entity, but a narrative constructed by our minds. It's a story we tell ourselves about who we are, based on our memories, beliefs, and experiences. Think of it like this. Imagine a whirlpool in a river. The whirlpool appears to be a distinct entity, but it's really just water flowing in a particular pattern. Our sense of self is like that whirlpool. It appears to be a distinct entity, but it's really just thoughts and sensations flowing in a particular pattern. In neuroscience, the default mode network, DMN, in the brain is associated with self-referential thinking and the construction of the narrative self. The story we tell ourselves about who we are. Research in neuroscience shows that the DMN is active when we're not focused on the external world, particularly when we're daydreaming or recalling personal memories. The DMN is linked to rumination and the perpetuation of a fixed sense of self, which can lead to psychological distress. The whirlpool analogy is supported by modern understandings of systems theory and emergence, where complex patterns like the self emerge from simpler interactions within a system, without there being a fixed core entity. Time and the self. Our notion of self is intimately tied to our perception of time. We believe we're entities moving through time with a past and a future. But as Einstein showed us, time is relative. And some physicists argue that time as we perceive it doesn't even exist at a fundamental level. Consider this. You can't go to the past or the future. You can only ever be here now. The past and future exist only as thoughts in the present moment. When you really look, you'll find that your life is always happening now. So the story of the self we tell ourselves to be in the DMN does not exist, because it is based on a story of past experiences. Einstein's theory of relativity indeed shows that time is not an absolute linear progression, but rather a relative experience that varies depending on speed and gravity. This challenges our conventional understanding of time and supports the idea that our perception of a linear past, present, and future is an illusion. Psychologically, the concept of chronesthesia, the ability to mentally travel in time, is central to our experience of self. However, this mental time travel often disconnects us from the present moment, leading to stress and anxiety about the past and future. Practices like mindfulness help us recognize that the only reality is the present moment, reducing the grip of time-bound identity. Awareness and the present moment is the ultimate reality. So, if we're not our thoughts, sensations, or the story of ourselves, what are we? Non-duality points to awareness itself, the knowing of experience. It's like the screen on which the movie of our life plays out. Characters and events in the movie come and go, but the screen remains unchanged. This awareness is not personal. It's not my awareness or your awareness. It's the fundamental ground of all experience within which all of life, including our sense of self, arises and subsides. Awareness as the fundamental ground of experience aligns with the concept of consciousness in both philosophy and neuroscience. Some neuroscientists propose that consciousness is not merely a byproduct of brain activity, but a fundamental aspect of the universe, akin to space and time. This is reflected in theories like panpsychism, which posits that consciousness could be a universal property. Psychologically, non-dual awareness or pure consciousness is experienced when one transcends the egoic mind. Studies in psychology and cognitive science indicate that states of flow, meditation, and deep mindfulness can lead to experiences where the sense of a separate self dissolves and one feels a direct connection with pure awareness or being. Living from non-duality. Now you might be wondering, if there's no self, how do I live my life? The answer is exactly as you are now. The difference is that you no longer mistake the character in the movie for who you really are. You play your role in life, but with a sense of lightness and freedom, knowing that your true nature is the aware space in which all of life happens. This understanding doesn't come through effort or practice, but through clear experience. It's like suddenly recognizing that what you thought was a snake is actually just a rope. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Living from non-duality can be understood through the psychological concept of self-transcendence. Research shows that self-transcendence, moving beyond a narrow sense of self, leads to greater well-being, altruism, and a sense of interconnectedness. Individuals who experience this shift often report a decrease in fear and anxiety, and an increase in compassion and equanimity. Cognitive behavioral approaches and mindfulness-based therapies often aim to reduce the identification with the self-narrative, helping individuals see thoughts as transient mental events rather than fixed truths. This shift in perception allows one to engage with life more freely and fully, without the heavy burden of a rigid self-concept. As we wrap up, I invite you to pause and notice your own experience right now. Can you find a solid, separate self anywhere in your experience? Or do you find an ever-changing flow of sensations, thoughts and perceptions, all appearing in the space of awareness? This isn't just a philosophical idea. It's an invitation to directly investigate the nature of your own experience. And in that investigation, you might just discover a freedom and peace that was here all along, hidden in plain sight. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of non-duality. Until next time, this is Elias Stasinos from Beyond the Self. Hit the like button and subscribe if you found this useful.